Wesley, don't forget Law 91. Always watch your back.
You too.
Wise words, since America has allowed Israel to goad it into a conflict in a part of the world where not everyone will have America's back. I'm Bintang Bernie, and this is Friday News Review. So, episode 5, watch your back. So to whom are we referring when we're talking about a back? Which back and who's going to be behind it? The issue in the Middle East, it's always been a powder keg. And the main reason, of course, as we know, is the creation of the State of Israel. Israel should never have been allowed to exist. It doesn't belong there. And it is a twisted society that has done nothing but fuel conflict and create tension with its neighbours ever since it basically invaded Palestine. And ultimately, Zionism is an appalling, apartheid, racially motivated ideology. It's not a religion. It's basically a political ideology. And the people of Israel are essentially apartheid, they're supremacists, and the way they carry on is disgusting, quite frankly. But that said, so we all know Israel is the thorn in the Middle East. But that said, there are so many other regional actors there who are doing things behind each other's back, and behind the scenes there is so much tension going on. Now, if we just look at the current situation, one of the countries which was initially overlooked, which people have started to talk about now, is Pakistan. Pakistan would be very clear that it does not want a Zionist-controlled entity on its border. If Iran is basically rolled by the United States and Israel, that's not in Pakistan's interest. Pakistan is a Muslim country, thanks to Britain and its breakup of India and working out how we'll just move people around. Pakistan has about approximately, its estimates vary, but it's about a 20% Shia population, which equates to roughly 40 million people. So there's a relatively large Shia component, the rest are Sunni, who will feel a lot of affinity with Iran. And in fact, as we know, there's been protests in Pakistan against the US Embassy. They attacked the US Embassy. So there's not much love for America or for Israel. So they're not going to relate too well to that. And as we talked about previously, and as I did an episode last year on Israel's nuclear policy, the Samson option, whereas if Israel feels that it's losing, which it is at the moment, Israel, as we know, is getting hammered by Iran. And there doesn't seem to be any chance of that letting up anytime soon. Iran has declared it's had enough. They're going to sort Israel once and for all. The danger is that Israel resorts to a nuclear weapon to get out of this, because let's face it, there aren't too many other options for Israel and the United States to walk away from this. So that's a huge risk. And the fact that Pakistan is a nuclear-armed power, would they consider then responding? Would they consider giving a nuclear weapon to Iran? And if logic is anything to go by, we have given Iran every reason, every single reason and impetus to develop a nuclear weapon because they've seen North Korea was the perfect example. Kim Jong-un was pilloried for developing nuclear weapons. He heard the great quote, Bush's, we're going to take out 5 countries in 5 years. And they started doing it. Remember the axis of evil? And Bush was going to go and invade North Korea. The Americans have been threatening to invade North Korea up until North Korea were able to turn around and say, well, if you invade us, we'll turn California into a sheet of glass. And they backed off. And next thing we had Trump standing on the border with Kim Jong, shaking hands. So the Iranians must be looking at this and going, well, maybe if we did have nuclear weapons, none of this bullshit would have happened. Who's to say? But that is a danger. Pakistan, a nuclear armed state, definitely does not want a Israeli Zionist entity on its border. And how far would they go to either retaliate to a nuclear strike or to possibly even initiate one? Then to the north, we've got Turkey. Turkey is a very unpredictable country, and this is not a slight on the Turks. It's their leader, Erdogan. I wouldn't trust him as far as I could throw him. One minute he's shooting down Russian airplanes, the next minute he's buying Russian S-400 air defense systems. So he blows with the wind. When Israel moved into Syria, after we destroyed the Syrian government of Bashar al-Assad, another tyrant. You notice how people suddenly always become tyrants when we want their oil or we want to change them. The Turks went in. They moved military across the border into Syria and took swathes of land. They've been fighting the Kurds in that region for decades. And the Turks designate the Kurds as a terrorist group. To be honest, the Kurds have been nothing but fucking trouble everywhere they went. It's about time they were told, enough's enough, okay? Settle down. Live in the countries you're in. You can't just go and carve this new Kurdistan out of everyone else's territory. But that's, once again, discussion for another episode. But Turkey is an interesting one. They cooperate with Israel, but at the same time, they don't like Israel. They blow with the wind, the Turks. If they were sensible, this would be an opportunity for Turkey actually to ally with Iran and solve the Israeli problem once and for all. If Turkey, Iran, and Lebanon, a la Hezbollah, all got together, that would pose a massive issue for the Israelis and may pull them into line, and could maybe be done with threat of violence rather than having to initiate a war. If the Turkish government took a stronger stand against Israel and against Zionism, perhaps then the Israelis would think twice before they did what they're doing now, which is, of course, they're bombing Lebanon. Why dropping cluster munitions on apartment blocks in Beirut is helping you fight Hezbollah on the border of northern Israel near the Litani River? I really haven't worked that one out yet. But as usual, Israel's response is, let's kill some more civilians. So we have these two nations to the north. We have, and as well as that, you've got Azerbaijan, which is arranging a deal with Turkey, which Iran has said it will militarily intervene to stop. So you've got all this powder keg, all this behind the scenes, watch your back stuff going off in that part of the world. But the other one that I'd really want to look at, and I think has been overlooked and has been ominously quiet. Since 2014, a group called Ansar Allah raised a movement in Yemen. Basically, they staged a revolution to overthrow what they saw as a corrupt government and fighting against imperialism. They were immediately, of course, attacked by Saudi Arabia and the lovely Saudis who are a dictatorial bunch of repressive bastards that we never talk about. And the UAE, those pricks got involved too, both of whom were beaten. They weren't able to defeat the Houthis. And they had the assistance of the United States Navy. You may recall at that time the United States Navy instituted a blockade off the coast of Yemen with its warships sailing up and down. So in the coming days, if you hear about the Houthis starting an attack, and you'll hear it framed in terms of their aggression, it is not. We've been antagonizing and fighting and actually bombing and killing the Houthis for a considerable amount of time. And the civilian casualties that we've caused and the suffering by the blockades that the United States Navy was an active participant in have caused untold civilian deaths in Yemen. So we need to be aware of where these people come, what their standpoint is. It's no wonder they don't like America. They protested against the genocide in Gaza. That's why they started firing missiles into Israel and why they closed the Red Sea. It was in protest to what the Israelis were doing in Gaza. One of the few countries with the balls to stand up to genocide and ethnic cleansing. Unlike my own country, Australia, where a foreign minister, Penny Israelis Never Wong, basically sent a few frowns across the camera and said it was all too complicated and did nothing. Oh no, she did something, sorry. She cancelled the funding to UNRWA at Israel's behest. Anyway, once again, I'm digressing. What I wanted to point out in this episode, where I'm saying watch your back, is the people who should be watching the back are the US Navy, because the Houthis have been ominously quiet. Now, you notice I just call them the Houthis. Normally in print media or in spoken media, you have to add this pejorative. You can't say Houthis without the preface of Iran-backed Houthis, and they're called proxies. I don't understand why Iran can't have allies, it can only have proxies. You don't hear of America talking about its Israeli proxies in the Middle East. All countries have allies. All large nations seek to have alliances within their region, within their area, and to forge ties with groups who have similar objectives, aims, and aspirations as themselves. And that's essentially what Iran's done. And the fact that they may have given funding or assistance, well, how much assistance does Israel get from America? Israel wouldn't exist without America. So there's a definition of a proxy. And don't forget that Egypt gets its assistance pegged at 2/3 of that given to Israel as a result of the Yom Kippur War, where America decided it would bribe Egypt to never attack Israel again by pegging their foreign aid at 2/3 of what they give to Israel. So the American taxpayer, as well as paying all this money, is $3 billion in direct military aid alone every year to Israel, funding all of the other things that Israel has, like free healthcare, all of the things that American citizens don't have. The American taxpayer is also funding a bribe to Egypt to keep Israel happy. So the true cost of America's burden, which is Israel, is phenomenal. It would be well over $10 billion a year that Israel soaks up out of the US budget. Anyway, we need to keep our eyes on the Houthis, because as you recall, they closed the Red Sea before and they did it very effectively. Now the Americans went in and, as always, claimed victory. What happened? Well, the USS Gettysburg managed to shoot down one of their own aircraft from the carrier Harry Truman, nearly shot down a second one, by the way, which apparently from some very fancy flying, well done the pilot, evaded the second missile, and they were about to launch a third missile. They were so overwhelmed with the Houthis' attack. Now, remember, the Gettysburg is a Ticonderoga class Aegis cruiser. Those ships were specifically built and designed in the late 70s and 80s to deal with saturation attacks from Russian missile barrages when the Cold War was still on, or I should say Soviet missile barrages. So these ships are specialists in air defense. That's what they do. And yet, so far, when they've gone into actual active combat, one of them managed to shoot down an Iranian airliner, the other one managed to shoot down an American F-18. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? The Americans seem to be masters masters at displaying how inept their equipment, how bad their equipment and technology seems to be. And also during those engagements, the Harry Truman was forced to evade incoming missiles and had to steer, to turn so violently. And as you can see, American aircraft carriers, surprisingly, they're very agile. You'd be amazed at how quick they can turn. But of course, in doing so, they heel very, very sharply. And one of the F-18s that was being transferred from the hangar to the flight deck fell over the side into the ocean. So only, what's that, only $70, $80 million just over the side? Small change. And then Harry Truman completed her deployment by running into a merchant ship. So it was 2 thumbs up for the US Navy. So basically, in closing, what I think we should be preparing for, what the United States should be preparing for, is to keep an eye on the Houthis in the Red Sea. Now, the Gerald R. Ford, their newest carrier, $13 billion worth of military hardware, is floating around in that area. And apparently there's a small fire in the laundry and the toilets don't work. It's all sorts of issues on that ship, as you know. Also, too, the Abraham Lincoln has withdrawn towards that region. Now, there are reports that the Abraham Lincoln was damaged. I don't know if that's true or not. I haven't seen anything to actually confirm either way. But at the very least, the Lincoln had to withdraw under threat of attack from Iran. That's a major victory, both psychological and militarily, because the Iranians have managed to chase away a nuclear-powered supercarrier, the epitome of American forward deterrence, or as they would call it, or what I would say is aggression. However, the Lincoln and the Ford are in the general area of Yemen. I would be very interested to see at some point the Houthis have to get involved in this. I can't see them sitting this one out. And I think America should be very, very careful to look over their shoulder, because you never know what's coming behind, boys. Anyway, this is Bintang Bernie saying, as always, there are 2 types of people in this world. Make damn sure you avoid them both.
And if you don't like it, then leave. Or use your right to protest on the streets.